I feel so comfortable in Los Angeles. I first arrived here in June 1979, and actually I married one of my 3 husbands, who are all lovely Baba lovers, in the old centre on the 7th of July 1979. And so I'm very attached to both my Australian self and my California self. I won't say whole of America because I don't know much about it. I'm a Californian. So where to start? Seeing as Lois read out that short piece by Francis of probably for the first time admitting to us how much he missed Baba. He came out with this little song in 76, way down the line. His face was before us, that was all we needed. Then he hid himself from us, now his message blows on every wind. His beauty entranced us, that was all we needed. Then he veiled himself from us, now his word is blowing everywhere. His love clothed and fed us, that was all we needed. But then he left without warning, but now his love springs up in every place. He wrote it in like minutes and brought it out, sang it to us, and we captured it. It's that small, and that's pretty much all I ever heard him have to say about Baba's passing. I'm sure it was devastating, and it took 7 years for us to hear this little song. Another thing I found, is Michael here? What did you do?
Yep.
Michael, can you help me? It's a bit boring if you hear the same voice all the time, you know. So we can grab this one. So I'll start it out. It's by Erich, and you can see it's even the old size paper, and I knew it was somewhere. I knew. And then suddenly I just started singing the Artie, typical musician, and that's where it was. It was in the big file called Artie, the history of Artie. And it was on the top. So it's our turn to hear it again. I'm sure some people know it. Transcript of the talk by Erich. Amartithi. Tithi, the date. Amar, the eternal date with the eternal beloved. It's nice to hear it in a man's voice because Erich wrote it.
So, Amartithi is a date with the Eternal One. It's a fresh date each time for us to make a fresh resolve to be His, to be determined to be His. When greeting one on Amartithi, the greeting is not greeting the other, but Baba in the other. It is like greeting Baba after a parting. Programs are conducted to entertain Baba, not the crowd, just Baba. And one must not forget him, or one cannot achieve this. The 15 minutes of silence is to celebrate when, if I feel, that he broke his silence and began to live in the hearts of us all. He seemed to drop his body, but really speaking, he released the world that was locked up in that body, the body which bore the original Word. The Word is made of flesh in the God-man. With the dropping of the body, the Word is released. So we celebrate this occasion when the Word is released and He dwells in our hearts. Many hearts come together from all over to be part of the celebration when He is here. Here to give us something, and we meet here to receive it. And that something is His love. And it is something, this love. It is some love, where all petty differences, all ranks, where everything gets drowned in the ocean that He is. And there is no turning away from each other, where all the hearts are coming to one platform and hailing Him. that his is the victory, and making all of us here know that he is the victorious one, and we the vanquished. An opportunity where we should shed all our opinions, all our differences, and come together as one heart, and make a place of one heart, beating, throbbing for the one eternal beloved. Beloved Meher Baba.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, Michael.
We'll have to get a copy of that for everybody. A treasure. Another little thing I saw pop up online was, because I was thinking, what am I going to talk about? I'm a singer. This is from Kitty Davey. On Amartithi, lovers of Meher Baba together all over the world, forgetting all else in the presence of his eternal and infinite spirit, this intimate sharing is a joyous sharing. As Mani, Baba's sister, remarked in the family letters in reference to the thousands who'd come to Maribad to pay their final respects at Baba's tomb before the interment, the breath that stirred this gathering of lovers was not so much a sighing of, "Come let us weep together," but a crying of, "Come let us adore him." Only Mani. And another little thing that popped up was, Erich said that Baba told him many times over to play this song, Begin the Begin, when he dropped his body. So on that night of the 31st of January and the next day, 7 times I played the song by his side, at first in the cabin where his body rested for a while and later in the tomb. And while the song played, it seemed to convey to us his message that was not an end, but a beginning, the beginning of his completed work bearing all the fruits. So it was in 1969, December of 1969, as I remember, my boyfriend at the time had been asked to write an article in a magazine called Go Set, which was a musical magazine on ice cream. Well, he finished that article and he wrote it so well about the sins of ice cream and all the chemicals in it. I don't think that's what they were expecting. That they asked him to write another article on the marijuana farms of Queensland, Australia. It was a Melbourne magazine, 1,000. People have trouble seeing the size of Australia, it's slightly bigger than America. So 1,000 miles away, this magazine asked him to write about the tropical farms as well as the organic farms as well as the marijuana farms of Queensland. So he goes around to all these people's places. Now, way back 2 years before that, this very eccentric Jewish atheist poet, did you catch that? Jewish atheist poet in Melbourne used to dance and sing and open pop festivals. And one time I heard him open a pop festival, not long or round about the same time as you were having all the festivals here too. And he came on with a sadra and a crown. His name was Adrian Rawlins, for the few that might have met this eccentric fellow. And he was a little older than the rest of us and a bit scary because he was so ridiculously uninhibited. And so he comes onto the stage and he goes, "I'm opening the festival in the name of Meher Baba." No one knew what he was saying. Meher Baba's gone, he's alive, he's alive, and I'm a nugger. But he was doing it with me having advanced hearing, I caught some of it and thought, who's alive? What is he talking about? Everyone went berserk and nuts and he's dancing and singing Don't Worry, Be Happy. And it stayed in my mind. And one time he was mad about food and we were in a Chinese restaurant and who comes in but Adrian Rawlins. and he loved to eat for free more than anything. So he pinched a whole lot of books from the local esoteric store that Paul Smith worked in, and laid a suitcase out on the table on the Sunday in the Chinese restaurant and said, "You can all have a book if I can eat with you." And I was very attracted to these three plain, rather grubby little books in turquoise colour with plain black writing on the front. And I said, "I'll have these three." And he just looked at me like, "Oh wow," I didn't know what that meant. And he got his free lunch. And I was very young, in my first apartment. I was reading these books, and I'd run to the neighbour and knock on the door. It was a friend of mine. "Did you know that a superiority complex is exactly the same as an inferiority complex?" And she'd go, like, "This girl's losing it. What is all this about?" And so I got into the discourses. I had not known I was this mental a person at all before. I'd been rather ditzy and vain and studying gemology and in quite a different realm altogether, the world of rock and roll, clothing design, gemologists. Anyway, I virtually read these books over and over, and then I realised through Adrian that Meher Baba had said no drugs, no marijuana. Well, my beautiful Hungarian husband was totally like all of the psychedelics and thought this was the way to freedom and enlightenment. And but I stopped it all and said that he had to stop it all because he was starting to talk in tongues in his sleep and all sorts of bizarre stuff, So he, will skip ahead, had heard that a very close one of Meher Baba had returned to Australia, and we ought to drive and meet him. Driving from Melbourne to Queensland is like driving from Florida to Boston to meet somebody. But off we went to find him. Much to my parents, my young parents, very attached to their only child. I just went off with this beautiful, tall, dark Hungarian to Queensland. So then he gets this job, and we'd been in the discotheque and the music world and design world, and we just left all that fancy stuff behind and went to Queensland. And then by the second job, he was asked to do farms. So we're back to where I was. So he goes to the fourth farm, and this guy had grown marijuana, but he didn't anymore. But he knew all about the ups and downs of the field. And so Stephen walks in, and there's a huge picture of Meher Baba on the wall. And he said, "Oh, that's Meher Baba. My old lady's totally into him. She knows all about him." And Sim Simons and Di Simons, who are still the longest Baba lovers I've known the longest, said, "Oh, well, how convenient. Meher Baba's Mandali just moved here and he's going to have a meeting tomorrow night. You're welcome to come." It was like that. The links. You all know about the links. Baba has links everywhere. So Stephen comes back and tells me we're going to go to this meeting. Well, suddenly I was terrified. I thought, well, these people, if they know all this, they can just see right through you. They know you're this little superficial dress designer, gemologist, and all you've ever done is study the discourses, and I know nothing, and he must know everything. If he lived with Meher Baba, who knew all the stuff in the blue books. So we go along to this meeting. Well, it was at a house. They'd have the meetings in married couples' homes, and once a month at the Abode itself. So we still hadn't been to the Abode. So we go along to the meeting. Well, it was in a little organic farm with this couple who had met Baba. They'd been Francis's carpenters, and so they met Baba and they became Baba lovers, the Shipways, Hazel and Norm Shipway. And they had this delightful meeting where you were doing a reading and you'd read each paragraph 3 times. Apparently it had been some old Inayat Khan practice to read paragraphs 3 times. I can't remember, it might have been Sarah God, I don't remember what book it was. Anyway, we did the reading, and then at the end of it, and I kept looking at Francis, and I was sort of shocked. He was short and humble, but I realised he'd probably dressed up for us. My father was a men's clothing designer, and he had a little tweed jacket and a little tweed tie or a sort of ill-fitting shirt, and I realised he had dressed up to meet us, these fancy people from Melbourne, And so when we got to meet him at the end of the meeting, here's Stephen, beautiful, long black wavy hair, great big eyes, Hungarian Australian, in little tiny short Irish glass beside him. With Stephen, he just shook his hand and said, "How do you do?" And just went straight to me then and said, "You look like a good Irish girl. Do you make a good cup of tea?" I said, "Yes, I mean real tea. I can really make really good tea." And he said, "Well, good then. You can be the chaiwala." I said, "Oh, thank you so much." But of course, I had no idea what a chaiwala was at all. "Thank you. Oh, I'm so pleased. Thank you." And so that's how we met him. It was just that simple. And he said the monthly meeting is next week at the property that Baba came to and blessed, and his room is there, and you're more than welcome to come to the monthly meeting. But we like people to present something, do something, read a poem or sing a song or something. Oh, this put absolute panic of God into me, but anyway, very self-conscious in those days. So anyway, we go along to this property, and we'd gone early because we'd been asked to come and share soup with everybody. It was 100 acres on the top of this huge mountain, Hills Mountain, and you looked out when you drove in the road that Baba drove. You could drive on that road then, and there was the Pacific and boats this big. I mean, you were so high up, and this glorious property. And it was summer, it was hot, but and then along comes all these people. I mean, a lot of people to this monthly meeting, and there were really good musicians and really, they knew all about all these things. In those days, we didn't know about the prayers or any of that sort of thing. And then we were told we could go into this room, and Francis explained to us about this room. It was really a sheep shed, some sort of animal kit shed that Francis had bought to quickly build for Baba when he came in 1958. So it's this huge shed, but in the end of it is a room completely made of the wood pali. This is the hardest wood in the world. It can last 700 years too. So it's self-contained, it's in that barn at one end, and that was Baba's room. And we got in there, and there's the smell of this strange wood. It's a West Australian wood, I believe, and the bed was pink and immaculate, and satin pillows, and we were sort of hippies, this was immaculate. And another table with flowers, and then a little brooch, I had supervision, the pajamas, and it was a heart and wings, and all Baba's fingernails were all the highlights in the wings of this beautiful brooch. And he said, and Baba's beloved, who I never heard of, Mayra sent us this as a gift after Baba had been here, and this is the tea towel that Baba had used, and this is the handle of the car that he held. And I'm sobbing like a baby, and I could feel Stephen sort of stiffening, like, oh my God, this is out there, man. And I'm like falling into everything as usual, fall into the whole situation. I mean, came out, and right as we were about to go out, he said, and Ma Baba touched that photo there and sent it to us, and it's blessed. So I don't even know how I knew to do this, but I automatically reached up and touched it. And he looked very pleased with me, so Stephen did it too. And then when we came out, he said, and this one too, and I reached up and touched the one on the outside as well. It's the most glorious room. If ever you can have a chance of just for $1,200 on Air New Zealand to go to Avatars Abode in this body, try to do that. You can tell them it's just absolutely an astonishing experience that Linda had 18 months ago. Anyway, so we did all that, and then these people sang. There was a jazz singer who I'd heard of from Sydney. I had no idea all these people followed Baba, and then I heard Pete Townsend follows Baba. I didn't know any of these details because I'd never been to a meeting before. In those sort of 20 months of reading the discourses, I didn't know any of that. And my thought was, if we can move up here, we can get Stephen out of that world, because he was breaking down. And very brainy, very bright man. And so we were just sort of welcomed, just like that, in December 1969, to be part of all this. And it took me a while to sort of work out that Francis was a genius and a poet, that he was resident Mandali for 10 years with Maya Baba, and resident Mandali poet, an essayist. But very quickly we found that out by going to the readings each week. Well, the next time we go to a reading, it's Stay with God. and he's there having us do the reading, the Stay with God, with unpronounceable words and concepts, left, right and centre. And we had to read every paragraph 3 times. Oh, it was so tedious, you know. But I stuck to it. I had this mind, I would stick to things. And by this time, Stephen's really involved. You know, he sees the potential of this property and the potential of the community, and he's very progressive. He's one of our great Barber filmmakers, Stephen Hine. He made the God Man film and other films we watched. Anyway, at the end of it, I remember saying to Francis, how do we understand all of this? You know, do we look at the references while we're reading it? Because I don't understand half of what I'm reading. So, just buy all the books in the back and study all the books in the back, and then you'll understand it. Just like that. So I thought, that's easy. Okay, I'll go buy all the books. That's exactly what I did. I went down to Brisbane to the American bookstore and bought most of the books of Ramakrishna, this one, that one, Malaripo, the lot, and we had them all stacked there, and we were trying to cram to keep up with this learning to read Stay with God with the author. We didn't know in those days that it was a commission by Barbara to write that book. We also, thank God, did not know that it was the second most important book in the world to Mount Barbara. And so things progressed on, and I did learn to be the tea maker, and then we lived 30 miles north of there, so Francis invited us to stay in the Bunkhouse, which is now the meeting hall, and we had these funny little triangular sort of rooms on the side, and we'd sleep in those rooms. And things progressed along. Stephen and I became the first couple to marry at Avatars Abode. Probably the first couple to marry at Avatars Abode who eventually divorced, but anyway, we married on Avatars Abode, and suddenly along came a young man. We learned about Barbara's birthday then, and then we learnt about the anniversary. The anniversary of Sahavas in June is the anniversary of when Mayor Barbara came there and stayed there for 4 days. And that's like a 4-day program, and every 10 years it's a 1-week program. And because when Barbara came there in 1958, everyone was asking Barbara all these difficult questions and things, Barbara wanted to be entertained. And they didn't even know the prayers. They didn't know what entertaining the beloved was all about. They hadn't a clue. And here's Francis, this poet and writer, way before he came to Barbara. They didn't have a clue how to entertain the beloved or how to even do a play or anything. So there is a focus, began that very year, on entertaining the beloved. Not necessarily talks or anything like that. No, Francis never gave a talk in the whole 14 years I knew him, but it was about entertaining the beloved. And these people came from Sydney, they came from Melbourne, they could sing the songs to Barbara, and the LePage girls and Michael LePage had all these songs that Francis had sent them that they'd sing. And so at one point, the LePage girls got up and sang a little song that says, "Every time I think of May, tears come into my eyes. When I think of beloved May, tears come into my eyes. Come soon, May, come for me. Tears come into my eyes. Waiting is eternity. Tears come into my eyes." And I didn't know anything about Barbara or prayers or really much of the concept, which is amazing that you can read the whole of discourses and not know a thing about the master and the disciple. And I just looked past them and looked at Barbara's beard. I wasn't polite and said in my head, "I want to do that." I wished I was still that powerful. And it occurred to me, driving home and everything, that I had been a junior ballroom dancing star. I had the rhythm, I could pick up melodies like that. I'd sing in the Salvation Army, musical talent shows, and I could pick up any tune, and maybe I could learn a song to sing by the Sunday. Well, I mentioned it to Francis, and he sort of looked at me pityingly. Trying to entertain the beloved's always a test, you know. And so he said, oh, well, this guy over here plays good guitar, and this is a nice little song, and he knows it. Maybe you can learn it in the 3 days and present this song. The song was called Eileen, and it was written with the name Eileen of a baby sister Francis had. And well, I don't know who knows Chris Gray, but Chris Gray can take 3/4 of an hour to tune up his 12-string guitar. And I'm already incredibly self-conscious, and he taught me this exquisite song. The moon pales as she sails on her journey nightly. The dawn breaks, Eileen wakes, the sun rises brightly, and her soul to her heart begins a sweet singing. Today is the day Mayhair is bringing. So I learned this lovely little Irish song. And of course, Chris took his 10 minutes to tune up, and I'm shaking like a leaf by the time I sang it, but I did sing it, and I got through it, and I could see Francis was very proud of me that I had done this. And he came up to me afterwards and he said, forget the ballroom dancing. There's no room in this world for that. And you have a beautiful voice, and you should go and learn to sing. And I took it seriously, as if he was a mentor telling me what I had a role here. I wasn't just the chaiwalla and the soup maker, you know. And within a year, this young man showed up, Sam Saunders, who was obviously some type of genius. He could just write songs at the drop of a hat, and he studied guitar and piano most of his life, and he'd been in some rock band that I used to hire for my friend's discotheque. So I sort of knew of him slightly. And he just started putting melodies to notating all the melodies and songs Francis had already written, number one, and then number two, putting melodies to tunes better for Francis, you know, and harmony and so on, till we ended up being the Avatars Abode Singers. And we were just absolute novices, and we were singing really tricky stuff really fast. So every year we would get better for Amartithi, or the birthday, or the anniversary. I'll call it the anniversary Sahabas, because it really is a proper Sahabas for 4 days. So we got better and better. Then some time in all that, we realised this is a very Eastern path. You know, this is to do with India, and there's all these people called the Mandali who would send things and presents and things to the abode and mention people and whatever. And finally, Francis, along with Bill LePage, decided that we should take this very big group by then. I'd been a couple of hundred around the abode, and at least 50 or 60 people in Sydney, that a group who could afford it could go to India. And that's when we realised also a lot of those people had gone in '69. We didn't really know about that, but we found out all the details as we were preparing to go to India with Francis. And we didn't really understand that he was a Mandali. You know, we just knew he lived there. We didn't know about all that, because he never talked about himself, and he never talked about anything, and he never gave a talk. It was just music, play, another play, more music, a tricky play, the quest, this, that, the other, really difficult things that we were coming back from our spaced out, drugged out hippie right into the moment with this person presenting stuff we're expected to understand and we're expected to do. And it was like being around money, where those that met money running, you're always equal. He was not a leader, you were equal. Everyone was equal. And so he was there, so you came along with it, you know, and you understood. You could understand, like you could around money, or Eric, you could understand. And so we're all preparing. In the meantime, as a background, tiny bit of that, Bill LePage and 4 other people had formed a company called Mayhair Handcrafts, and they would bring Indian imports into Australia. So they were all going back and forth to India, and they invited us in 1971 to join that company, because we'd both been in fashion and design and all that beforehand. So Stephen had been to India once or twice before this, but I had not. I had never been overseas before, actually. And so Meher Handcrafts was making a lot of money, donating a lot of money to India. We'd all just draw $20 a week, and a lot of money into Avatars Abode and Meher House, and things were getting much easier and nicer with a proper bathroom and so on, not an outhouse, all these types of things. So that's sort of the background. So then we're all, a group of 40 people, are going off to India in 1973, but we're going back with Francis Brabazon. Rana had come out, I think in about 1971, I met her. She had come out to try and talk Francis into coming back to India because the Mandali was struggling with all these crowds of people coming from America particularly, and only one resident Western Mandali, and that it would be nice if he could come back. But he wrote a letter and kept saying, but the work is happening. The work that Baba wrote and said he wrote through me, it's happening. These people are interested in the work. They're interested in the poetry. They're interested in the plays. They're interested in the songs. So finally he agreed to come with us. So we decided to go on, Francis and I shared a birthday, the 24th of January, which was very nice. I'd get cake on my birthday. And we'd gone on staying there. We'd go up there on the Friday nights, stay the weekend, and go back on the Mondays. And we'd stay on the Abode in a little space called the Bunkhouse. And so off we went, for the first time overseas for me, to India for Amartithi. I had no idea what that meant. And we arrived, and Francis just thought he was staying at the Ashoka Hotel in Ahmednagar with the rest of us. Next thing, Artie's car pulls up, nothing doing. You're staying at Marizad, you're a Mandali, you're not staying with them, you're coming back out where you belong. And so we all moved into the Ashoka, and Francis went out to stay at Marizad. And so the next day, they had booked Marizad sort of every day for us in the beginning, because we were part of Francis's flock, which we hadn't realised the true significance of all of that. And we get to Marizad, and I'm like Alice in Wonderland here. I've got like 360 everywhere with this ridiculous country, India, my first trip overseas. And so we get to Marizad, and as the bus pulls in, that energy of Marizad, it's just overwhelming. And we're all coming out of the bus, and Francis looks up at us all. And also we planned a musical program to put on for the Mandali. And Francis looks at it all and he says, and you're going to take Baba's darshan in Baba's room and at Baba's chair, and don't be a nuisance. And don't ask them a lot of questions. Just let them relax. Don't do any of that, just relax. And you're about to meet a real man. So out we come, and his name's Eric Jessiwala. So we go in, the Mandali are so humble and so quiet in those days, particularly the women, and we got to meet them all one by one, and we'd been informed before we left who was who, and then we filed into Baba's room, and by then we were used to bowing down in Baba's room at Avatars Abode, and bow down to the chair, and then asked out the back for tea and so on. And Erich comes in the back door and he just looks at us all, because we're about to then sing this song, which I'll tell you about. And Erich said, look at you all, aren't you clever? How did you all get to involve yourselves with a real man? The two of them just loved each other so much. They were so different, And it was just delightful to see Erich. He had Francis back again. And all of the work in that 4 years up until then, and growth and growing, and for all of us really that were around the Abode, and fixing it up as well because it had deteriorated a lot. It was like just for that moment to see these two men see each other again, who'd seen each other like 18 hours a day for 10 years around the Avatar, which must have been very difficult, full of love and beauty and full of terror as well, to see them meet again, and his flock, that he had brought along with him. And I was convinced, I didn't say anything, that he'll never come back. He'll always stay here, he'll never come back. What we got, and we're very lucky, you know. And so we stood there, and Sam did all these complicated arrangements. I looked back and listened to what we sang, but I don't know how we did that, because we were very naive about music and everything. And so we stood there and we're about to sing, and Marnie's looking at us, and by then they'd all heard all the American beautiful folk rock and all this, you know, good chords and so on of the new folk rock genre that was Mea Baba at the time. And what do? Baba, now we stand before you, pouring out our song of praise. Nothing more do we implore you, but your love makes pure our days. May her Baba, beloved Baba, give us love, since love we must. May her Baba, let us be nothing but singing dust. And we had 3 verses. And we had all the parts, you know, the whole jolly thing of Jesu joy of man's desiring. Marnie's got tears running down her face. Unbeknownst to us, they were raised Catholic with Western music, and they just loved all this sort of thing, you know. It was just, I was completely into doing the right thing. I'd had years of singing lessons by then, as I was told to go and get that ticket and in voice. And I studied with some fabulous people, a white Russian from the middle of Russia, teaching classical voice as well. So, and we had song after song, and the Mandali were just thrilled and just amazed at these people that had evolved to be around Francis. So then it went into, you could see he was nervous, and they were sort of calming us, cookies and tea, and, you know, trying to, you don't have to be this perfect, you know. And we went every day. We only went for 2.5 weeks, as I believe, but we went to Marisad every day, building up to Amartithi on the 31st at Maribad. No, that was after. So we go along to Maribad, and of all things, they asked us to sing this half-hour-long piece. Can you imagine? We got to sing at Amartithi for half an hour, singing to the Eternal Beloved, part A through F and G, and we sang the whole thing. Now, when I look back on that, it sort of established Maribad as much more eclectic than just the American sort of folk songs, or somebody, an Indian invited, a really good Indian. It got to be that everybody got to sing things, you know. And so just watching, I've got some pictures on my phone I can show people afterwards of 73. It's where I met our dear Georgianne Erskine, who's still part of this community, and some people from England, people from all over the world, people I had never even imagined existed, being a little Aussie from the suburbs. And just staying up all night with Erich, you know, for 2 nights, and just getting tired and worn out and so spiritual you couldn't function, you know, you didn't want to do anything else, you just wanted to stay there forever, you know, doze off and wake up again to things. It was very primitive then. There were no trees on the line at all. There were 2 tea stands, just 2. Then if at the most, if there were 500 of us, I'd be amazed, 500 or 600 of us. The samadhi, you just went in and out of it. You sat inside it. You sat inside the samadhi around the tomb. Francis had started relaxing a bit, and Bill also stopped bossing us about. So we sort of calmed down. We're all in our late teens and young 20s. And you had no electricity, no sewage or septic. You had little lanterns. And we got to meet Padri, who light the lanterns down the bottom of the hill, and we'd go up with the lanterns. It was freezing cold, very cold winter, and slowly it was as if we were not in a group, because there were so many people, and we were getting to know the Americans and the British, a lot of British people in those days, and us. And then people that worked abroad would come, and Don Stevens came. We got to meet people that had been around Baba that Francis and Erich were mad to see and happy to see. and crazy to sing on it, really happy to sing. And so somehow we got through Amartithi and we sang our half-hour program while the Mandali were weeping through this program because we didn't know that this piece, Singing to the Eternal Beloved, had been written in 1968, February, for Baba's last birthday. And Baba loved this piece. And it was an attempt of Francis to sort of write sort of a mantra with a theme going through it. There were hidden ghazals, late ghazals, 68. There's 3 very late ghazals in it. But it's sort of like reading God Speaks in 21 couplets. And then you get through to the end and there's the mantra. It was a beautifully written piece. And so the Mandali were very emotional that we were singing this. They hadn't heard it since Baba's last alive birthday. And I'm glad we didn't know all these details. No, there was an innocence to all of our stuff then. So at the end of this, Amartithi, we were young enough, we had sort of grokked, that age is me, understood everything we'd done for years. It all sort of came together. It was like threads, and it all made sense. These amazing people, like you meet Irani, and it's like a Native American slashing his wrist, and your blood, you're their blood, you belong. He loves you more than you ever can imagine. He loves you as much as he loves us. You're here, and Mera said, you cannot be here by chance. That's not possible. You're all here, you're all linked, you're all family, you're here, you've arrived. And it was like everything was like that. Everything had that thread. And it all came together in those 3 days. And the silence, I'd never been silent before. We didn't have much ritual at the Abode because I don't think Francis knew all that stuff by heart. So it was just so many things, and Mera's tea, and so on. And then the joy that built up to that 12:15, to that silence, that Baba has released everything to everybody, anybody, the good, the bad, the ugly, the blame, the dreadful, the glorious. Everybody's equal. Everybody can have this. That's what he did at 12:15 in January 31st, 1969. It's available. It's everywhere. It's in his frog's toes. It's everywhere. And you felt that. You felt the beauty of being part of it. I wish I could still feel that. As Eric said to us, the longer you're with Baba, the further away he seems. And in those days, he was right here. It wasn't like that. And when it ended, Francis and Bill and Eric came to us and said, well, we had this bus. You're sort of like the society of Baba, we're on this bus, And they said, well, we're taking you somewhere, Baba would go a lot. We're taking you to the land of 1,000 saints and Allura. So off we went with Erich in this bus out to Allura and the land of 1,000 saints, and he would tell us all these things that Baba had said about the places. And we stayed in an inn, and in the morning he'd come and tap on everyone's door to wake us up at 5 a.m. I'm not a morning person, I'm a musician, I'm a nocturnal. Knock on the door, Ji Baba, oh Ji Baba, Ji Baba, toast and tea, Ji Baba. And he went round there to every room and woke us all up, to have toast and tea. And we get in the bus again and go into all the mosques and all of the things in the land of 1,000 saints. And I noticed he'd always donate to each mosque or whatever we were going into to the caretaker. That always stuck in my mind that he did that. And then when we got to Zazali Zarash, he said, so this is the golden six-planer. This man, don't ask anything here. Don't ask him for anything, because you'll ruin everything if you ask him for anything, because he gives gold. You can't do that. Don't ask for anything. And that's when I also, there were all these threads, I realised Francis was from the school of not asking. Do not ask. Do not pray for things. You'll mess. It's difficult for Baba. He's got to juggle things. Don't ask. So I realised, Eric is like that too, and he's also telling us about the saint, that if you ask, and he's a saint, you could get it, and that could mess things up. So that, as a young girl, that really stuck in my mind. And then Eric nudges me and said, see all these green bangles here? This is all green marriage bangles. The girls bring all these green bangles and leave them here because hoping that Zari Zabash will align them with the perfect husband. Take some, take a heap of the bangles. So we took a whole lot of the bangles. I still have them, these green glass bangles, and that's also when I got into green bangles in a big way, you know. Any sort of bangles, glass bangles. And as a gemologist, I do believe that they were gems once, whole gems. They just take the middle out. Keep them, they would have been rubies, emeralds, like the jade ones are in China, you know, and now they're glass. And I was also fascinated by it as a trained gemologist. Everything glittered. It looked grey, but if you really looked, everything was spectromated. There was so many gems in that dust. I don't know if there was some, I think Jay Shower, the author, he said that he has found a book on that there was a massive volcano, and that's actually what formed the Deccan Plateau. So if that's true, it is all gem. It's all that dust is gems. Beyond powder, you know, but it's all. And I saw sparkle everywhere in that valley. Anyway, we came back, and by this point, Francis was so proud of us. You know, we had handled something we had no idea about so well, and we sang all our beautiful songs so well, and because we'd been at the Abode and trained, and there were very few Indians in those days, we knew how to step back, we knew how to be, you know, in what we saw Francis' father world was. And so that was my first Amartithi, January 31st, 1973. I must say that when we got back, everything was different. For me anyway, a lot of us, everything was different at the Abode. We suddenly realised, oh my goodness, Mayor Baba and those people stayed here. And when we first got there, it was a bit run down, you know, because Francis had been gone for 10 years. And so we came back, number one, with a different mission. When we got back from, I'm forgetting something. When we got back from Ahura, now you all go to the Mount Pilgrim Centre, and then you all went to those that have been lately, to the Mount Pilgrim Retreat, and all the beauty and the comfort and whatever, well, the discomfort of men and women's side, but the many comforts and terrific food and everything. But back then, what did we do? We had to stay in town. This is even before Mayor Colony, before they opened up Agbar Press. We had to stay in town in the pub, mind you. The Ashoka was pretty much the only hotel there. There was another place called the Dowlat, which was sort of like a backpacker's place, now when I look back on it, and had all these little funny rooms, and people that didn't have money for the Ashoka stayed in the Dowlat, particularly long-term people. And then there was a canteen, and Godrich, an old Parsi, ran the canteen where you could get ginger ale and toasted eggs and all sorts of luxuries. And if you stayed at the Ashoka Hotel, you had hotel food. But there was nowhere to stay at Maribad, and certainly never has been at Marizad. So what they would do is, in all those little cabins that are now the post office in Lower Maribad, and the different rooms and little cubbies like where Janet and Ted lived for 30 years, little cottages, and the dharamshala for the older men, we got to stay in those places. But remember, it's winter, there's no electricity, and there's little lanterns. So they would have some buyers come in from Arangown and cook big pots of dal and rice and bakri, and we in turn, I think about 10 people at a time, got to stay at Maribad for 3 days each before we left in those last 9 days. It was, I've never in my life gone camping to start with, and here was this amazing experience, and this astonishing man called Padri, strict. What do you want, madam? Are you going to eat all your food? Don't take too much, madam. Are you sick? What is wrong? Why are you so white? I said, I'm a redhead, we're white. Oh, okay. You need a tonic, you come to me. I'm homeopathic. That means you can't have any chai though if you're going to have homeopathy. What do you want, madam? It's all beautiful. man, Padre. And so Padre organised like the cooking and this and that and the other. There weren't all these other help there. And Padre and Francis just would laugh. They just had a perpetual laugh. I don't know what it was about. But I know Francis was sick once for 3 months and he was transferred to Maribad for treatment. And so they got very close at that point. But most of the monthly, most people before Baba dropped the body did not go to Maribad. Baba himself did not go to Maribad for like 10 or 12 years, I believe, before he dropped the body. So here we were staying in these cabins and we'd have the lights. And it was dark because it was winter. And there we were with Dooney. Now we'd already been told a lot about Dooney. Francis was unusual about Dooney. He said, do not go near that thing. It's like Eric Jabat, don't ask. Do not go near that thing unless you are very serious and very committed to throwing in whatever the desire is. Really be serious about it. And so I got so scared I actually didn't do it. I just thought, well, if he's this cautious about it and he knows so much, what do I know? I'm not going to go throwing anything in. Anyway, I like my things and I like my life. I'm not going to do it, you know. So I watched everyone else do it. And I watched a year later many of their lives fall apart. And I was really proud of myself that I hadn't done it, you know. And so then the next thing we go to meet a must. And we were just so green, you know, it was fabulous that we were like we were. Fortunately, I've written a lot of it down for when I get dead and they can write a book from my minutes. Anyway, we go to meet Muhammad. Now, one of our group, Jasmine, was very high. I mean, naturally, she's exactly the same. She's like 70 now. She looks about 12 and she's still high. I don't know what she's got. I'd like some of it. So Jazzy had this new boyfriend, so she was extra high. And so Jazzy decides, oh, it's a must. And she dives at his feet, fully prostrate. Eric's screaming, Padre's screaming, everybody's freaking out. And I'm guilty, whatever it is, I'm Irish. It must be my fault. You know, I'm dying, 6 deaths that she did this. And Jazzy was an interesting person. She was a chess genius, actually. Her brother was an international chess star. He practiced on her since she was 4. So she also had this, and still does, this 360. She feels things. And as soon as she got down there, you could see she knew she'd done something wrong, but she didn't know what it was. And she scurried up as quick as she could. But the boyfriend, who was new to Baba, he then did it just what she had done. And everyone's freaking out, you know. Muhammad's laughing. There's photos of him in 73. He is hysterical. He thinks this is the funniest thing he's ever seen in his life, that somebody bowed down to his feet. And nobody said anything, but it was sort of stopped, and the rest of us knew not to do it. And that's how we met the must. The must looks at me, who's just the chai wallah, and I hope these people can't see through me and don't know that I'm, you know, just artistic and I'm not really spiritual. And he says, you, get upstairs. Oh, here it's translated. Get upstairs. Now. Get upstairs. And I sort of looked naively around and Eric said, that means you have to go up to Samadhi, and it means you have to go right now. Right now. So a couple of people walked up with me and I bowed down and everything. And we came straight back down because there was really no one there in those days. And we came straight back down, and by then they had this man, Sidhu, singing a song that he loved. And Mehera Baba, Mehera Baba, Mehera Baba, God man, God man, God man, Mehera Baba, God man. He is here, he is there, he is everywhere. Mehera Baba, Mehera Baba, Mehera Baba, God man. It has a lot of verses and everybody knows it. I just sat there, hypnotized by the sweetness, you know, of this type of music. And then this other man, and Amartithi had sung this song called Sachibolo, and Sam fell in love with this melody, and the rest of us loved this melody. And so we said to Francis, we'd like to learn that song. There's absolutely no use learning songs in another language, said Francis. No use at all. The language that you're born with, that's what goes to the heart, so there's no point in singing songs in another language. And this was the end of it, you know. But we were sort of secretly memorising it, but the only thing we really remembered was the Sachi Bolo with our broad accents. And so when we got back, to our amazement, while we'd been in India, Francis wrote us English language words to that. Meher beloved, Meher Baba, Meher beloved, Meher Baba. Meher is the all-sounding lovely name of the one who was yet again he came. Meher beloved, Meher Baba. Meher beloved, Meher Baba. Meher means mother, Meher means father, Meher means sister, Meher means brother. Meher beloved, Meher Baba. Meher beloved, Meher Baba. Now the last verse, sing his lovely name throughout all the day. Sing until singing becomes your way. Meher beloved, Meher Baba. Meher beloved, Meher Baba. And it was really the first Eastern thing that had come out of Francis, or that we knew a thing about, in all those 5 years from 4 years from 69 to 73. And he had respected the fact that we loved this melody, and there was no way we could have sung it Marathi, and it turned out it was a Tukaram song. And so that also led to Erich taking us to Owrang to show us this little place where Tukaram would come on pilgrimage to this one little place. And then Erich decided that we had to go to the movies. We had to go to Sarosh Canteen and Sarosh Movie Theatre with all the mandali, the women, the men, and he would hire the Tukaram film from Pune, and we would see the film, lease the theatre for the day, and we'd go with the mandali to the pictures. Oh my goodness, I was very excited about this. This was right up my alley. So we go along, and that's when I sort of panicked to think of Mera out of Brabazan coming to the pictures, you know. But oh boy, I just watched those women. I mean, they'd done this all their life. They were just so skilled. It was so natural of protecting her. She just, you know, she was like Barbara. She walked very fast. So she would just charge ahead, and they'd have to scurry to keep up with her and make sure no man touched her or whatever. And it was just magic to watch this, watch the skill, watch the dedication of their whole life to keep Mera pure, even in the pictures. And so we go in and we see, and you can see it online now. The Tukaram film is completely online by All India Movies. Beautiful film, and had these songs in it. It also had the Sachi Bolo song. And Erich also did it again the following, a few days later he hired an old famous Meera movie. So right away we're also learning about the saints of Maharashtra and just information, you know, we were just flooded and high with Baba, the Mandali, and how humble they are and how they function. They just function like an organic unit, you know. And with stories, of course, Erich with thousands of stories and thousands of questions. So we were actually told by Francis we could ask a question. So I'm sitting there, I thought I'll never get a turn. It's all about the boys, you know, and the girls just hook and stitch and and so on. Suddenly, Francis looks at me and says, Raine, have you got a question? And I had been building up a question. So I just looked at Erich and said, well, I have always wondered, with diamond being the hardest substance in the known universe, do you think it's the firstmost stone or the lastmost stone? And Erich looked at Francis and said, like, where do you get these people? Why would anybody ask me this, you know? And he looked at me and he said, you know, Raine, I've actually never thought about that and I've got no idea. But I'll think about it. I said he'd think about it. And then we had we slipped into just being regular Westerners by the last week, with the Americans coming and us hearing all their music and just magic stuff, you know, to us. And they're strumming guitars, and I then wanted to learn guitar. And it was just a magnificent time. Anyway, we go back, it was the gap of the Thursday, we went back on the Friday, and Erich said, oh, by the way, someone mentioned something about dust and stones, and there was a poem read out about dust. Industry hadn't been published, and so we really didn't know about all that world yet. And Erich said, oh, Raine, I've been thinking about the diamond. And Francis was thrilled that this ridiculous child had this question, and now she was going to get an answer from Erich. And Erich said, I have to imagine that being the hardest stone in the known universe, which I've just found out about, that it has to be the lastmost stone, because Baba was so compassionate that he'd have you experience all of yourselves as stone before you got to this sublime, simple, complicated stone. So, in my opinion, it would be the lastmost stone. I was in bliss. I was in absolute bliss. I have looked into millions of diamonds. They are carbon. That's all they are. Why aren't they just like a lead pencil? It's so complicated. It's too complicated even scientifically to think through. And this man answered this question that over 4 years was much more important to me than valuing a diamond or anything else that in the evolutionary path, this complicated, simple stone was the lastmost stone because of Baba's compassion. So I got my famous, infamous question answered. There were tricky questions people would ask. He was always so humble the way he would try to answer these things then. And we would just all, sit in the floor and stuff like that and come in and out on our bus. And then it was time to leave. And in the meantime, we found out that there were these prayers. And not only that, there were these artis. One of them was in a strange language. One of them was American. And there was this song from the East-West Gathering that Baba had said, this is a true arti, this is the first Western arti. So in those days it was called the Western arti. And in that time also Rano decided that because Baba had said so much about it, other than Hank Menlon's American arti, that really the Australian arti should be the arti most of the time, and the American artis some of the time, secondarily because it was so long, and also the Australian arti is just all praise. It is what an arti is, it's praising the divine of the beloved. So we learned to sing that properly in the 2 weeks. We learned to say the prayers. We all came home with sheets of the prayers. And so when we came back, we were like pulled inside out like a sock. And like, a sock that's got a pattern on one side and no pattern on the other. We were totally, it reminds me of Japanese, there's that, in Kabuki there's this thing where they come in a grey costume and all these people who are invisible in black screen at the back get under the costume and pull threads in it, and within an instant it's red. It was just like that. Nobody was who they were before, 14 days before. We were just amazed. We were just calm. Also we were calm. That was the other thing I noticed. We were so excited when we came going back. We were sort of exhausted and calm. Of course we had stayed up all night at Amartithi. So, just such an old Amartithi and so far back. And to look at so many, 30,000 people are due to be there right now. And the beautiful pilgrim centres, electricity, highways, so much has happened in those years, that it's just amazing. Only the speed of the Avatar, only as fast as Mera and Baba could walk and you couldn't keep up with the umbrella, is what developed here. A divine energy came about. And I'm sure there's people who went even earlier than me and see a bigger contrast. But that was Francis's second Amartithi. He was there in '69, and we had the happiness to be there with him. And so just to close that out, once again. His face was before us, that was all we needed. Then he hid himself from us, now his message goes on every wind. His beauty entranced us, that was all we needed. But then he veiled himself from us, now his word is going everywhere. His love clothed and fed us, that was all we needed. Then he left without warning, but now his love springs up in every place.